Good evening. The time is now 6:34 p.m. We'll go ahead and start the Thursday, May 9th, 2019 Planning and Zoning Board meeting with a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Anthony Brown.
Present.
Margaret Shepherd.
Here.
Edward Canuti.
Here.
James Gallen.
Here.
John Gustafson. Renee Burgess.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Item 3, acknowledgement of board member absence notification.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff Gagnon, Acting Director of Development Services. Tonight, we did unfortunately hear from Mr. Gustafson. He had a death in the family, so he won't be joining us tonight. Additionally, we received word from Mr. Jackson that he actually submitted a resignation notice this afternoon. So we want to thank him for his time volunteered on the board, and we know that he'll continue being involved in the community. I think everyone else is present, and everyone is a permanent board member, so you don't have to give any voting rights. So.
All right, thank you. Item 4, additions and deletions to the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did want to make note of the May 6th memo that should be in the back of your binder. There's a cover memo dated May 6th, and within that there were city comments from April 12th, as well as an applicant response from April 15th. Those were inadvertently omitted from the original packet, so I wanted to make sure those were included. But that was kind of the discussion between staff and our consulting plat reviewer and the applicant as far as finalizing comments. Additionally, there were some minor amendments that were made to both the northern plat and the southern plat, and those are provided in that supplemental packet that was provided to the board. So those would supersede the documents within the original packet that was distributed.
Okay, thank you. Item 5, disclosure by board members in adoption of the agenda. Are there any disclosures? Seeing none, do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Anthony Brown.
Yes.
Margaret Shepherd.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Edward Canuti.
Yes.
James Gallen.
Yes.
Renee Burgess.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
All right, item 6, approval of minutes from the April 11th, 2019 meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Anthony Brown.
Yes.
Margaret Shepherd.
Yes.
Edward Canuti.
Yes.
James Gallen.
Yes.
Renee Burgess.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Item 7, unfinished business. There is none. On to item 8, new business.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have one item under new business, which is letter A, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, approving the plat application PA-19-01 for Florida Power and Light, FPL, totaling approximately 88.68 acres, located at 2460 Port West Boulevard, associated with parcel control number 56 42 42 36 33 000 0000, and providing for an effective date. This is actually somewhat of a continuation from the previous site plan that was provided to the board in regards to this site. I believe previously about 6 months, maybe a little bit longer than that or so ago. FPL provided site plan information for approval by the Planning and Zoning Board as well as City Council. And this is associated with that as far as cleaning up those different parcels and providing, final platting to legally create the property boundaries and delineating those sites. At this point in time, I'd like to ask Ms. Ann DeVoe, our senior planner, to provide a presentation for the board and public. Ms. DeVoe? And I'll get out of your way.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gagnon. Good evening, Planning and Zoning Board members. Ann DeVoe, Development Services, for the record. To briefly summarize, the plat application before you is a request on behalf of Florida Power and Light. The project name is Florida Power and Light Port West Physical Distribution Center plat. The request is to approve two final plats, north and south, for the Florida Power and Light Port West site, to consolidate the 6 parcels owned by Florida Power and Light that support the existing physical distribution center facilities. This plat application is required to comply with the condition of approval contained in Resolution Number 141, approving the major site plan review application to create a master plan of record for the 6 parcels. This is the location of the subject property. It's approximately 0.12 miles east of the intersection of Military Trail and Port West Boulevard. Okay, an aerial view depicts parcels A, B, and C as plat north, and parcels D, E, and F as plat south. The zoning district for parcels A, B, and C is general industrial, IND, and parcels D, E, and F is utilities. The zoning designation is consistent with the future land use designation. Now, to the north, you have the general industrial zoning district. A recreational vehicle park is there. To the south, you have the general industrial zoning district as well. The Florida Power and Light offices are there. To the east, also zoned general industrial. The Florida Power and Light power plant and Interstate I-95 is there. And to the west is also general industrial, and the Rapids Water Park and other industrial uses borders the west. The lot size is approximately 88.68 acres. The north plat consists of parcels A, B, and C, and it is comprised of 5 pages. And the south plat is comprised of 4 pages. Now, all parcels are owned by Florida Power and Light, and they have been in existence for approximately 30 years to support the operations of the public utility. It should be noted that, as Mr. Gagnon previously pointed out, that the City Council approved a major site plan application SP 18-17 that was approved on December 19th, 2018, to create a master site plan that includes the properties and in these two final plats. Staff is recommending approval of the plat application PA 19-01 from FP&L, imposed by resolution number 141 as a condition of approval to create a master plan of record and unify the parcels. That concludes my presentation. If the board has any questions, I'll be happy to address those.
Does the board have any questions of staff? Okay, seeing that there are no questions, Jeff is the applicant here.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Walter is present, representing the applicant if you have any questions.
Okay.
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members. Colleen Walter with Urban Design Kilday Studios, here on behalf of Florida Power and Light.
Good evening.
As Mr. Gagnon has indicated and Ms. DeVoe, this is essentially the last step in completing the overall master site plan for these sites. There was a condition of approval imposed by the City Council to plat the properties, and so we are bringing forth the two plats that are before you this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that there has been no comment cards issued from the public, so we'll go into board comments. And I'll start with Mr. Brown.
No comments.
Mr. Canuti?
I'm just curious is there a timetable to complete the next phase of this?
At this point in time, there is no new development proposed. However, the condition of approval does require that the plats be recorded before they come forward and seek any further development approvals. So we're just essentially completing this so that the properties will be in position to move forward with any future expansions that FPL may have.
Are there future expansion plans on that property?
Not at this point in time.
No other questions?
Thank you. Ms. Shepherd?
Yes, you mentioned the past, I guess the past productions that you're doing on that property. Have you started, my mind is kind of cloudy. I think it was about trucks or something you were building there. Kind of explain that again.
Okay, sure. Let me, pull up my aerial.
Your presentation? All right.
Just an aerial, I think.
Okay.
Which is in my presentation, if you want to pull that.
Yeah, it'll be better.
Okay.
I think you have the prettier pictures.
With all due respect to Board Member Brown, plats are not good color renderings.
It's the beginning slide.
Thank you, that's perfect. Great, thank you. Yes, this project has been a three-step process, this being the third step. But initially, we came in for a site plan amendment for what is known as Parcel A. And that was to add a permanent building that was associated with the vehicle commissioning that's part of the physical distribution center. Because at that time, when we met with staff, it was identified that there was not a complete record of the physical distribution center on file in the city's records. As Ms. DeVoe said, these facilities have been out there for over 30 years, and there just were not plans that showed what was there. So we did come forward and received site plan approval for that. As a condition of that site plan approval, there was a requirement, or actually an agreement, to bring in an overall site plan so that there would be a record of the existing facilities on site. And so that, I believe, was brought to Planning and Zoning Board last November and approved by the City Commission in December. And as part of that approval, the City Commission imposed the condition to plat. So this is the third step to complete that. But yes, your recollection of that very first application up here was for an additional building. That was the only improvement that was shown on the overall master plan.
Thank you, you kind of cleared it up. One more question. Have you started anything in that first particular building?
Yes, I believe that it's under construction. Yeah, the permits have been issued and it's under construction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gallen?
No question.
And I don't have any questions as well.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Brown?
I just have one, and it was a typographical error in the mortgagee's consent. State of New York, New, Y-O-U-R,
Is that on the plans?
on the front page of the plat.
So that's in the North Plat?
Yes, no, South Plat, sorry.
South Plat.
And the North Plat also.
Say, I do know the plats, I think the addendum to your agenda includes the revised plats that had the name of the new mayor revised for that.
Yeah.
You see that?
It's
Yeah,
your versus.
your.
Yep, thank
Alright.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, so if we have no further board questions or comments, is there a motion?
I move to approve the plat with the correction.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Anthony Brown,
Yes.
Margaret Shepherd,
Yes.
Edward Knudey,
Yes.
James Gallen,
Yes.
Renee Burgess.
Yes,
Unanimous vote.
thank you.
Thank you very much for your consideration. Good evening.
You're welcome, thank you. Okay, item 9, workshop items.
Yes, Madam Chair. Under workshop items, we have letter A, which is a discussion of proposed amendments to Chapter 28 of the City's Code of Ordinances entitled Signs, in order to provide for content-neutral sign regulations as well as digital sign use associated with places of worship. What we want to do at this point in time, again, this is just a workshop item, but what we wanted to do is provide the board and public with kind of an overview of some of the research we've been able to do to date, specifically associated with the digital sign use in relation to places of worship. So once again, I will pass the baton over to Ms. DeVoe and ask that she provide a presentation of her findings. She's been doing a good majority of the research on this, so she's now turning into our resident expert on this. So
All right.
we'll set the bar high.
Good evening once again, Ann DeVoe for the Record Development Services.
Excuse me, Mr. Gatling, I don't think that particular item is in my book.
It's not in none of the binders.
No, ma'am.
Oh, it's not in-
There's no text or hard copy document. It's just a presentation to provide our research and findings to date. So we don't have a hard copy of the document, but we can provide hard copy if you'd like one.
I would like to read it.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to.
We'll get hard copies printed right now. You have an extra one?
Thank you, staff.
Okay, the presentation involves research into digital signs and being permitted in the residential zoning district. Just to summarize, let me read first the code definition for digital signs. According to City Code Ordinance Section 28-1, digital sign means a type of animated sign capable of displaying words, symbols, figures, numerals, or images that can electronically or mechanically change by remote or automatic means, and its components may include, but are not limited to, light emitting diodes, liquid crystal display screens, plasma screens, and their functional equivalents. Sign display elements may be illuminated by reflected light. A digital sign may be a part of another permanent sign that is not a digital sign. The City Code of Ordinances, Section 28-125, states programmable digital signs approved by ordinance number 4059 in 2015 regulates permissible locations for digital signs, in addition to providing separation requirements from residential districts. Currently, the code limits the use of digital signs to locations having a community facility zoning designation. Section 28-125 permits digital signs in the community facility CF zoning district. And this district basically is lands that are owned by the city or administered by the city for the purpose of public uses. The permitted location must be associated with a public use. One sign per development site, not more than 100 square feet in area per street front is permitted. And no digital sign within 250 feet of a residentially zoned parcel or residential structure. The following slides are digital sign examples, photos. So what some of them may look like, this particular one is a part, the digital part is a part of the sign associated with the school, public use, associated with the university and elementary school. The slide that we just passed, this is an aerial view of that slide. It is located in the Community Facility Zoning District. But as you can see, there is a major thoroughfare separating it from the residential zoning district where the sign is located about there. There's also a wall that buffers that residential zoning district there. So there's absolutely no impact from this sign to those residences. The staff also did some research, actually, of approximately 41 municipalities. And the chart that you see here is a representative sample of the larger municipalities. And as you can see, in the red, on most of these were not permitted anywhere. There was one, I believe, that was permitted in a single-family zoning district and multifamily zoning district from Boca Raton, but there were stringent guidelines and regulations for those signs. Next slide. Also, there were two other outside jurisdictions that were considered and researched as well, and the same does apply to those outside of the county. Okay. Some of the standards that staff was considering, if we did want to move forward with making amendments to approve digital signs in residential zoning districts as a special exception approval process, we would basically have the standards that we have for digital signs presently in the code, in addition to some additional standards to be met as a condition of approval. Some of those would be that we would consider meeting a separation criteria of no closer than 100 feet from the right-of-way. It must be located 250 feet from a residential structure, not be located on a site with less than 100 parking spaces located on the site, limited to only one sign, limited to 24 square feet per sign face, and an aggregate of 48 square feet, limited to 7 feet in height, and the sign would convey only information relating to operation of the premises where located. No advertising related to other entities or businesses would be allowed. It would emit no more than 1 foot candle of light measured from the property line of an adjacent property. The display would be limited to alphanumeric text and directional symbols. It must contain static, motionless messages only. And each message on a digital sign must be displayed for a minimum of 6 seconds. Each message must be complete and not continued subsequently to another displayed message. Displaying of any form of motion or optical illusion of movement, movement of any illumination or flashing, scintillating video or varying light intensity is prohibited or would be prohibited. And the sign would be operational during hours actively engaged in the activity, but in no event would it be earlier than 7 a.m. or later than 9 o'clock p.m. And the sign must be licensed, well, the business or the place of worship must be licensed with an active business tax receipt for a minimum of 1 year. These are just some of the additional standards that staff is considering in case the board decides to move forward with the special exception approval process. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Let the record reflect that there's no public comment cards, so we'll move into board comments. Mr. Brown?
Not at this time.
Okay. Mr. Canuti?
So what's our next step?
So the real intent of tonight's presentation was to bring the board and public up to speed as far as what our research has discovered. I believe if I remember correctly, Ms. DeVoe stated there were approximately 41 locations that were examined, and only one of them allowed for this use with additional considerations. So it seems as if what the research is indicating is this is something that's not very frequently occurring. And I think we're at a point now, based on this research, where staff is looking for direction from the Planning and Zoning Board, whether or not the Planning and Zoning Board wants to have staff continue down this pathway. These standards that were just discussed are some options that we could utilize as far as additional standards to safeguard the community or adjacent residents that could be located either across the street or within close proximity of a digital sign. But overall, I think staff is looking for feedback from the board on whether or not we should proceed or whether or not we should provide this information to City Council with a recommendation to potentially stop going down this pathway.
Thank you.
I was just curious, why, what was the genesis of bringing this up in the first place? Doesn't sound like almost anyone is doing it in other municipalities. There doesn't seem to be any cry for digital signs in Riviera Beach. There are people demanding them. I mean,
Right.
should our position just be, we don't need them?
It could be the genesis of this process was actually through a city council directive, which happened, I don't remember the exact meeting date, but it was a few months back at this point. There was, I believe, one constituent that
Well,
was
that's
looking-
changed.
That is true. That is true. And with that, I think that's why staff is looking for input from the Planning and Zoning Board as far as if the board sees this as a direction that would be beneficial to the city. Again, Ms. DeVoe has spent a good amount of time, really digging down into this and drilling down to see what adjacent municipalities are also doing. So we're at a point, thank you, Walter. We're at a point where we feel as if we have a large enough data set to indicate that this is not something that is frequently occurring. Not to say that the Planning and Zoning Board could be an outlier or that the City Council could recommend something different, but I think we're at a point where we're looking for input from the Planning and Zoning Board.
If I remember our discussion, the primary potential user would be churches, which are usually in residential areas.
That's
So,
correct.
And I think a few of the comments that were made were that that would kind of be an imposition, in your neighborhood to see these flashing signs or whatever, however we describe them. My feeling is, we're creating a rule that nobody seems to need. We're trying to create a rule that nobody seems to need and, probably better off without. So that's my view.
Thank you, Mr. Canudi. Ms. Shepherd?
Mr. Gagnon, going back to the churches, can you give me go back and give me a view of what the signs you're talking about with the churches flashing? I haven't seen one flashing.
I believe these are just general examples, so.
Hold it there.
Yeah.
Now, what's wrong with that sign? And they're flashing a message of the time or the date or?
I don't want anyone to think that we're saying there's something wrong with the sign. We're just providing the data and the research as far as whether or not other municipalities have these regulations or don't have the regulations. So the trend right now is that other municipalities don't provide for this type of signage, for digital signage. But again, we're not saying that there's something wrong with it. We're just saying that this is not the trend that we're seeing in neighboring communities.
So if this go into effect with the council, you would send letters to these different churches or businesses and say they can't use these signs? Because I know one church came to my house and started talking about the city or planning and zoning is trying to shut down the church from getting a sign. And I just need to know what's wrong with a sign like that that's flashing their messages.
The current conflict is our sign code doesn't allow for that use. So the discussion and the practice we're going through now is to see what other local municipalities have done and how they've treated that use. The research has shown that there's not really many others that are allowing that type of use or sign functionality. But the current difficulty staff is having is that our code doesn't allow for it, our current code.
Not being disrespectful, that's your people saying it's flashy and whatever. I don't think the churches are bothering anybody. I think that if they want a sign, they should have a sign. I don't think it should be no restrictions. Those churches been there before I was even born. And now they want to put the signs where people will see. It's not flashy. It's not bothering anybody. And I want to know, why did this come up? the churches are really, really upset. So why are we targeting this? We should be doing other things rather than targeting signs for the church.
So again, Ms. Shepherd, the discussion was our current code, in essence, prohibits this use. So there was the discussion at a council meeting, and they directed staff to look at the code requirements, and part of any code amendment process would be providing the information to the Planning and Zoning Board, receive input from the Planning and Zoning Board, and then provide it back to City Council.
Mr. Gagner, truly, I understand what you're talking about. But I've been to these churches in the cities and Riviera Beach. Those churches aren't bothering anybody. And they want to put a sign out there. I mean, why bother? Because what you're going to do is flare up, and those people are going to come in here and bust these chambers wide open if you bother with the churches. Now, I just don't see it, and I want to go on record. I really, that's why I asked for this, because I really don't want to be a part of it. I really don't.
The difficulty staff has, again, is that the code prohibits it currently. So
Staff
we
need to go
can't-
to church, man.
Okay, I have a question for staff. Are you finished, Ms. Shepherd?
Yes, I am.
Okay, staff, does Ms. Shepherd need to state for purposes of disclosure the churches that she had communication with in reference to this issue?
Well, Ms. Shepherd can disclose, make a public disclosure of whoever that she feels that she met, and that if this item comes before the Planning and Zoning Board, today it was just as a informative discussion workshop item. So yes, if you're going to make any recommendations regarding amending the sign code to allow for this use, then yes, at that time, I think it would be appropriate.
First of all, I'm just rescinding for being a part of it. And in my home with private conversations, I don't have to disclose anything. It was the discussion, I was there, they brought it to me, and you know, to have it not into the agenda, I mean, but you can do what you want to do.
Thank you, staff, for your response.
Excuse me, I was not through, Ms. Burgess, I was not through.
I'm sorry, Ms. Shepherd, but you didn't ask to be acknowledged.
I
and
didn't
the
have to ask.
question
You
was
called my
proposed.
name. You called my name, Ms. Burgess, and I replied to it.
No, ma'am, I was asking the question to staff. Staff,
So,
are
Ms.
you,
Excuse me, Mr. Gagnon.
staff, are you
Excuse me,
finished?
Mr. Gagnon. I don't want to be a part of this. And, you know, I just want to move the dais because I just don't want to be a part of it.
Ms. Shepherd, permission to address the board?
Staff, yes, you may. Thank you.
Ms. Shepherd, you could always abstain from any discussion or abstain from any kind of recommendation that the board makes with respect to this issue. That is your pleasure, your choice.
Thank you, staff. Mr. Gallen, your comments?
Yes, I think I spoke about this before. I know, first of all, I would like to say I think the people in the neighborhood will also need to be notified if this is going to happen, so it will probably need to be added to your standards if we decide to go forward with this. Some neighborhoods have associations. You know, those people have to be notified. They have to be able to make a decision whether or not they want to see that in their neighborhood. I know with me, I have a church there. I know I wouldn't want to see it in my neighborhood. And I don't know what would it do to the property value with having that sign or that type of signage there. You know, so I think staff need to or see if they can find out any information on that.
Just to be clear, to see whether or not the property values would be decreased?
Yes.
Certainly.
and that the neighborhood and/or associations need to be notified to say whether or not they would want it.
Thank you. Noted.
Thank you, Mr. Gallen. Well, I did have one question in reference. Staff did research 41 other cities, and most of them did not agree, or this is a non-permittable use. So did you note any specific reasons that the signs were unpermittable in those other 41 municipalities? Like, did you see a trend or something
It
to that
was
effect?
basically, the common response was that the lighting would be a bit much for the neighboring residents. And the other comment or responses that were given is that they don't belong in residential neighborhoods. Those were the two common responses.
Which I can totally agree with, and that is how I see the situation. I don't think that this would be something beneficial to our city because we have a lot of churches, and I just don't think at this time that this use would be beneficial to the city. So those are my comments and my view on this issue. So being that we have all of the board's comments, how would we like to proceed? Motion to city council or directive to staff not to pursue any further. What's the pleasure of the board?
Chair,
Yes, Mr. Gallen?
if it was up to me, I would say not to pursue it any further.
I would agree. Do we have agreement from the other board members, Mr. Brown?
I agree with you.
Mr. Canuti?
Yes.
Ms. Shepherd has already stated that she would not like to take any part in this. Am I correct, staff?
Yes.
Okay. So then you have consensus from Mr. Gallen, Mr. Brown, Mr. Canuti, and Mrs. Burgess to not proceed any further
So
as
what,
our recommendation, as a board recommendation.
okay, what staff can do is provide the meeting minutes from tonight's meeting as well as the consensus from the Planning and Zoning Board to City Council. Ultimately, it's the City Council's decision, so they'll take the board's recommendation into consideration.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 10, general discussion, public comments. Let the record reflect that there are no public comment cards submitted. So we'll move to item B, correspondence.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to make note of the correspondence provided by Mr. Jackson, the resignation notice noted earlier.
Okay, thank you. Item C, Planning and Zoning Board comments. Are there any final comments from the board? Mr. Brown?
No comments.
Mr. Canuti?
Just one question to staff. At our last meeting, you had mentioned that you were working on a presentation for one of the Broadway properties north of, the vacant properties north of Blue Heron. Is that still in process?
Yeah, we actually, I believe if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm thinking something different, but one of the former sites that functioned as a trailer park that's been demolished, that's a site, yes,
Correct.
we actually were anticipating that coming to the Planning and Zoning Board, I think it's on our May 23rd meeting. So
Okay.
it's an application for future land use amendment, zoning amendment, site plan approval, and plat.
Okay, very good. No other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Canuti. Ms. Shepherd?
Yes, Mr. Gagnon, can you please explain the drive-in on President Barack I'm really not feeling well.
Barack Obama Highway?
Yes, I had people come and they wanted me to explain it. I can't explain it. A yellow sign was up. And I know I saw planning and zoning. Did they sell the building or did they not?
Yes, so the.
I'm sorry, the site. Did they?
The site is located on the northwest corner of President Barack Obama Highway and 13th Street. Is that the site that
Yes,
functioned as an
that's-
old drive-in movie theater?
That's it.
So that was actually presented, the site plan was presented to City Council on, I believe it was May 1st, the
Okay.
first Wednesday of the month. The site plan was approved by council with a 3-2 vote, and it seems as if the development will move forward.
What are they building on that site? The warehouses?
So they're building what's been called like a Class A warehouse space, which is really designed for today's kind of clean industries. So it could be used from anything from a distribution center for a company like Amazon or similar, all the way to other supply chain or logistical centers for industries that don't deal with any sort of chemicals or tires or flammable liquids or anything that could be potentially harmful to the community.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Gowan?
No question.
Okay, I don't have any additional comments, so we'll go into project updates and upcoming projects.
Yes, Madam Chair. So as previously noted, we are anticipating to meet on May 23rd. We'll take a look at the project that was just referenced. What's the name of the project again? The project name is Riviera Cove, and it's proposing 89 townhomes. So we look forward to a review of that project.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Meeting adjourned.